go up. The volume.
Beans and cornbread had a fight. Beans knocked cornbread out of sight. Cornbread said, now that's all right. Meet me on the corner tomorrow night. I'll be ready. I'll be ready tomorrow night. I'll be ready. I'll be ready tomorrow night. I'll be ready. I'll be ready tomorrow night.
All right. How's it going, folks? That was the intro to Don Palmer's radio show that he had. What was it?
WORT FM, Madison, Wisconsin. It was a 1 to 4 drive time show. It was called Beans and Cornbread. And what you're listening to was the cassette recording of my last show, because the station and I had a disagreement. So I did a 3-hour fuck you goodbye letter to them. Playing Stokely Carmichael, Malcolm X, reading Norman Mailer, reading Floyd McKissick's Seven Principles of Black Nationalism, as well as playing Richard Pryor. I thought, they can't fire me, I'm a volunteer.
You like to mix it up. Welcome, folks. Welcome to the Songster Series. Way back in the summer of 2017, before most of you were even born, we had a musician from Tacoma Park, Maryland here. His name is Warner Williams, and Warner Williams is known as what they call the last living songster. And songsters are musicians that would play songs. You might have guessed that. But if you think about it, back before there were record players and cassette players and cell phones and CDs and the radio, if you wanted to hear a song, somebody had to play it for you right in front of your face. So it made a lot of sense for musicians, working musicians on the streets, to know a wide range of songs, and they liked it. But you know, things happen, and as the record industry starts to get going, and some other things start to happen, these musicians start to appear narrower than they really were. And there are lots of musicians that you may be familiar with. Unfortunately, we can't for a lot of them be familiar with their widest range, because they were narrowed. Most of the time this happened because of race. That's our favorite thing. So Warner is somebody who, you know, was steadfast and kept playing a wide range of music. And so he's known as the last living songster, but the kind of, my theory of the series is that he was not at all, and that you can find musicians with a wide range of influences everywhere, including here in Baltimore City. And I've had a great time sitting down with different local musicians and getting to hear about their influences. But for our very last Songster series, I don't want to talk to musicians anymore. I want to talk to music listeners, because the series is geared towards getting listeners to embrace that wide range as well. So we have a professional music listener with us. How long have you been listening to music, Don?
Since I was about 6 years old. My parents claim I saw Thelonious Monk when I was 3 years old. They said they took me. I don't know. But since I was probably 6.
I was being facetious. You were probably always listening to music.
Well, who knows? My father wanted to be a middle-class doctor. He may have stopped playing music for all I know.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But
so maybe we should start there. So your father, not from here.
No.
Right? Where's he from?
He was originally from Durham, North Carolina, but he and my mother met in Philosophy 101 at Morgan State.
Very cool.
And he played clarinet, apparently, he says. He says he saw Charlie Parker in Philadelphia. I can't prove it or disprove it. And he took me to see Monk when I was 3 years old. Probably screwed me up for life. So
It'll do that, in the best ways, right? Awesome. So I have a list of things I usually ask musicians. I'm going to ask you, what is your first musical memory?
Probably, I'm going to say that where I actively was involved in music was my school had a French teacher in second grade in Toledo, Ohio. We sang the French national anthem with the symphony orchestra. Go figure, Toledo, Ohio, why are we singing La Marseillaise? But we did, and it was fun. And we had a music teacher named Dr. Robert Carroll, who became the Toledo Blade music critic, classical music critic. And he would play us music, he would make us memorize the songs, the composers, their birth dates, and if you weren't paying attention in class, he would hurl a piece of chalk at you. That would get him fired these days, I'm pretty certain. But he was a diva. At that point, they didn't call it that back then, maybe. But yeah, but he lectured us on music, and he thought we needed to know about classical music.
So this was strictly classical.
Straight up classical music. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
But it stressed an importance about knowing what and who you're listening to, I guess.
Yes, you had to. Well, it was rote memorization. Birth dates, who wrote the Messiah, who wrote whatever. It just was that. And you had quizzes, you had tests. But the point is, he played you music and he made you listen to it for 50 minutes, how long the class was. And they did take us to the symphony orchestra. My school also took you to theater production and things of that nature. So it was. I went to a country day school. I was the first Negro there in 1960 in first grade. And it was, they believed in a liberal arts education. So that was just part of it. You had to read books and write book reports in third grade and fourth grade. So that was just part of your well-rounded education. And then my father also was a choir director at the Lutheran Church. So I had to go to choir practice quite often with him because there was no babysitter. I was not religious. I didn't like choir practice. And we had the black Lutheran minister we had. His son became a piano player, and moved up to Seattle, Washington. Our next minister we got was a Latvian. He'd been a prisoner of war, sort of. He dug trenches for the Nazis. He smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day, drank the communion wine, and he wanted the black Lutheran church to sing the Germanic liturgy, which was not particularly, it wasn't very soulful.
I was going to ask, what was your father, what were his choirs singing? Were they singing?
They were singing the Lutheran hymn book, Onward Christian Soldiers, Marching Off to War, all the same stuff. But when the Northern European, Lithuanian, Latvian, whatever it was, came in, we had to do it in the martial German rhythm structure. It wasn't very fluid. And he didn't understand the Black Jesus either. So.
A lot of people don't. And so, I don't know if it's okay, but.
Yeah. So, and then my parents insisted that I take piano lessons from Mother Maybelle Shealy, who taught piano, and she was, you had to learn to read by sight, trying to learn how to play by ear. She did not approve of. We did recitals and a whole bit. She apparently played with Art Tatum many years ago. He's from Toledo.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what did she play?
She played piano.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like a dual piano?
She played with Art Tatum. Probably at that point in time, I didn't know who Art Tatum was when I was a 7 or 8 year old. I figured that out later. But she also taught Stanley Clarke, who I accuse of stealing my talent. So, pre-con stuff.
Yeah. So, I don't know how far back we should jump. I
guess I should say, my parents, in their efforts to be proper middle class people, had me take piano lessons, got an upright piano for me to practice on, which I would try to set the clock ahead as if my mother couldn't tell time. But she never really busted me for it. But they also bought me, Disney put out 12 classical records, one of which was Fantasia back in the early 60s. They bought me the complete set. So I had those as a kid, whether I wanted them or not. So I was encouraged to appreciate the value of music. And also, I forget this, I remember that between 6 and 9, I saw 9 operas, because Toledo Symphony Orchestra did operas. My parents took me to the opera every, 3 times a year, get dressed up, jacket and tie, go to dinner. I'd fall asleep by the 3rd act, but it was a complete full opera. I had to sit through as a little kid. There was one other black kid, the guy there, whose name I cannot remember, but he was obviously black. Back then, I believe the term was probably a sissy, from my parents' term, but they liked the kid. He would clap, bravo, bravo. And it was just us and him in this auditorium at the Peristyle Theater. But I saw 9 operas, and so I think that's, I don't really like opera, but I sat through them as a kid, and I think the pageantry, the symphonic work must have some impact, because you're immersed in it, and it's not being dumbed down for your attention span. So I did do that, until my father wanted to wear dashikis to the opera. My mother did not like that.
That's interesting.
Or a Nehru suit either, so.
I'm sure it's happened since then, but probably not a whole lot. So it sounds like you're getting an education in the importance of music, but it sounds like there's a range going on here. You're getting classical music, you're getting some jazz. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about what your parents were listening to. And
should I play one of my father's records?
Sure.
Okay.
I'd love to hear it. What you got?
I'll show you. Didn't get this up here.
Don brought a big bag of vinyl records that he's going to donate to me after the show.
You wish.
I'm so honored.
Yes. I'm looking for Ornette Coleman.
What are you looking for now?
Ornette Coleman. I got it. You can take the rest out, and I can tell you whatever you want. And this is...
That's really heavy, though.
Yeah. When I was a DJ, I always took way too many records to the radio station. We may not play the whole song due to time constraints.
We are currently hearing Ornette Coleman's Change of the Century. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. I can't see. Well, we're partway through. Okay. Now it's dark. But this is literally one of my father's records. He had Change of the Century, Shape of Jazz to Come, and Free Jazz, just in his record collection. Mr. Monk. And I grew up with this stuff just sort of around me.
So,
and I didn't know what it was at that point in time, but I can tell you.
What is it?
What is it? It's Ornette Coleman's Pianist Quartet from 1959 on Atlantic Records. And people thought he was a heretic because he wasn't playing bebop or quote bebop. Also, he didn't have any chordal instrument in his band. So this was, I didn't quite get it, but I liked it.
So you were hearing this as a kid in the house?
Well, I would play it. He didn't. My father stopped playing music when he decided to become a doctor and a father. But that's a different issue.
He decided to stop playing.
Stop really listening in an active manner, because he had to go to work and come home, and he wanted to be a responsible father. So I don't have any. That's even my mother's issue.
So you picked up the reins for him.
Yes.
That's cool. It looks like you've kept his records in mint condition. That's nice.
Yeah. It cost $5.98.
So this is pretty heady stuff, especially when you were growing up. It's pretty cutting edge stuff. I wonder if you can kind of talk about that in that.
I was really more interested back at that point in time in the Royal Guardsmen and Snoopy and the Red Baron. I didn't like the Beatles at all. I like Hermit Hermits. And I listened to music, 45s. I could play some 45s even. But my father once said, he said, you listen to music, you like music, you'll listen to jazz eventually, because that's real music. So by the time I became a teenager, after going through a little bit of Rolling Stones phase, which I really liked, and listening to Jimi Hendrix, I was going to play guitar so I could look like Jimi Hendrix and be a Rolling Stone kind of guy. And what I discovered was that the Rolling Stones songbook was missing a song, a Robert Johnson song. And I was like, what the hell? Why isn't the song in the songbook? And I did some research, and I realized that they didn't have the rights to it. I also found out that Fred McDowell was suing them for You Got to Move, which he won the lawsuit. So I went back, sort of went down the rabbit hole, and went back to find out where the source material came from. So the Allman Brothers playing Statesboro Blues, I would tell my friends, they didn't write it, Blind Willie McDowell did. So I did that kind of research. And also, John Sinclair of the White Panther Party in Detroit, Michigan, Ann Arbor, had the Honor of Blues and Jazz Festival, which I listened to and listen to the music from that. And so I just started getting more and more into the roots of American music in various ways, to the point of that I liked Bitches Brew, but nothing after that for Miles Davis because it was all amplified. Didn't like Herbie.
You're talking about Miles Davis.
Yes, I didn't like Herbie Hancock's Headhunters.
These people seem like they're quite educated, but pretend they're completely uneducated.
Okay, Miles Davis did Bitches Brew. Remember, he said to make the greatest rock and roll band in the world. That was his goal. He did do it, but
you think so?
At that point in time, 1968, I think so. Yeah.
Okay, I'm just asking.
I mean, I got to say, one of the best concerts I ever saw was Muddy Waters opening for Miles Davis, Electric Band. You know.
Muddy Waters being the
opening act for Miles.
The Seminole Blues.
Yes, Miles. Yes, Muddy Waters, Seminole Blues man. I'm not going to play any Muddy Waters. We got to slow you down a little bit. Okay, so I basically turned my back on any kind of amplified music, other than rock and roll, straight up rock and roll, but fusion, jazz, any of that stuff I didn't really like. A lot of rock and roll I didn't listen to much, unless it was very blues based.
In Toledo, there's some cool radio stations that you're able to pick up. I wonder if, before we speed ahead, I wonder if we can talk about that a little bit.
Beth, will you bring me over the 40? Oh, never mind, I have them right here. Just for the cool radio station, for the background music. Windsor, Ontario had a station called CKLW. They had two things they did. They did news 10 minutes on the hour, and they would do the news and the murder beat, whatever it might be, because Detroit was a little violent back in the 1960s. But they also had a rotation policy, one black, one white. So every 45, a white band, a black band. So I got to listen to stuff like this.
This
was 1968.
That's a pretty remarkable thing for a radio station to do that probably wouldn't even be thought about in this day and age.
So I grew up on this as a kid. I didn't like Motown. So you can tell me what this is.
We're listening to some soul.
Soul, yes. And then
this is electrified.
But it was soul. It was rock and roll.
You can't get it unelectrified.
But I wouldn't listen to Junior Wells, Chicago blues harpist, who's a buddy guy. His album Hoodoo Man Blues, which is a classic album, but I thought he's trying to be James Brown. He's selling out.
Now I wonder. We'll talk later about how you became a music writer, but I do want to spend some time talking about
one more little thing here.
Yeah, how this music was turning you on. What about it was working for you, and what made you seek it out?
Let's see if this tells you why. Anybody recognize this? It's really old. This is Garage Band Funkadelic. Parliament, yeah. So, the answer is, it's complicated. It's a cultural, first of all, I was an only kid. And lived in a suburban area. We built, a Lutheran contractor built a house for my parents because they couldn't buy the property themselves because they wouldn't sell to Negroes. And so I didn't really have any friends as neighbors. I went to a country day school, so I rode a school bus to school. So I lived in my head a lot. I started collecting records and stuff, baseball cards, basketball cards. My mother taught public school, so they would leave me home alone. I was maybe 8 years old. I think they'd probably get arrested after that. I was a latchkey kid in some ways before they had that term. So I spent a lot of time just on my own and have an hour ride in the school bus each way, first one on, last one off. So I had a lot of time in my head imagining, I don't know, I used to sing to myself Love Potion No. 9 by the Coasters, or whoever the original version was. I wanted to be that guy. So this made me happy. It gave me something. And
what about it was making you happy, though?
The groove, the funk, the one. I liked this. I couldn't dance worth a shit. I couldn't sing.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know how to sing.
Talk to me about the groove. What is the one?
Listen to the bass line. I mean, it's precise for in front of and behind the beat, either way. So it's just, it's got a flow, and I guess it appealed to me. I don't know how you describe that musically, unless I'm writing about it.
Sure.
And like Garage Band, it's trashy, it's rattly, it's nasty, This is like beans and rice, leftover pulled pork, that 2-day-old sweet potato pie, and pudding, banana pudding. It's like,
There's some real grit going on in the Detroit area. Detroit is known for, really.
This is recorded in Detroit.
Yeah, known for pretty aggressive music, both in the rock scene and.
I guess the way to better explain it is that you have to think in terms of what I was listening to. There's Dinah Ross and the Supremes, Tammy Wynette, early Marvin Gaye, the Four Tops, all that pretty stuff that Berry Gordy put out, nice harmonies, pretty black people. Tammy Terrell, okay. yeah. And so I didn't like that stuff that much. I liked the grittier. And I was into the blues, even though I didn't really necessarily know that. But Toledo had a fairly healthy blues scene only because it was on the circuit between Chicago and Buffalo. So Hound Dog Taylor played there. I saw him numerous times as a kid. Howlin' Wolf. those are some of my favorite concerts. Going to the Rainbow Ballroom in Detroit. I mean, imagine sitting as far from that chair. So Hubert Sumlin, Howlin' Wolf's guitar player, who was a masterful guitar player, huge pothead. Howlin' Wolf's got a packet of cool cigarettes rolled up in his see-through cotton shirt, polyester cotton shirt. And that shit was heavy. You know, I mean, you're looking at these imposing figures, and there's something enchanting about them. I don't know, you know. And so that was sort of my early musical experiences. Some of them outside of going to church, which is a Lutheran church, doesn't really count. The music sucks, and you know, the operatic or classical experience. So I think I just liked the down home gritty minor key stuff and percussion.
Now,
he's going to read something I wrote and make fun of me. Okay.
No,
No,
not at all.
I'm just joking.
I do like this article that you wrote about the seminal blues musician Tbone Walker, though. Now, Tbone was not the grittiest guy. Not a Muddy Waters or a Howlin' Wolf, but a lot smoother. But
he had pristine phrasing,
yeah,
and that single note runs coming straight out of Charlie Christian, and it was a jump band. It was West Coast. It wasn't Chicago. The Southwest so that's a different era too of a different region. Now I will admit that if a band wanted to play Stormy Monday, I'd probably shoot the band playing Sweet Home Chicago or Mojo first. Then I would shoot Stormy Monday Band because it's a song I hated hearing all the time, but that was his big hit. But Tbone had a rhythm, a phrasing that was unique.
Oh yeah.
I think so. That's what drew me to him.
Yeah.
Suave.
Yeah. And maybe this is a bit of a bridge from us talking about the blues to getting a little bit back into jazz, to where you started picking up with jazz. Not to say that Tbone was the guy doing this for you, but you write of the complete recordings of Tbone Walker, 1940 to 1954. By the mid-40s, Walker had collected a group of like-minded musicians in Los Angeles to record a series of seminal singles where he corralled the dramatic imagery and energy of the blues into the sophisticated confines of jazz. Yet Walker's recordings are those of a blues man appropriating jazz trappings, not of a jazz player using blues for comic relief. There's a lot there.
Well,
talk about it.
Let's see. Let me give you an example. There's a guitar player named Lawyer Houston. I think lived in California and all. A bunch of his recordings and stuff. Johnny Griffin, the tenor player, who's in Art Blakey's band, worked with Coltrane. He was out of Chicago for a while. I was interviewing him or talking. I was driving around Madison, Wisconsin. Johnny Griffin had no recollection of those recordings. It was just a gig, man. I just got paid, a studio gig. The jazz guy was on a blues record, playing blues stuff. He was like dismissive of it, like it was a paycheck. So that's what I mean. Wynton Marsalis once said to me that Lester Boyd was just a blues trumpeter. Lester Boyd from Art Ensemble Chicago. You all know who Wynton is, I assume, right? Wynton said he's just a blues player. I'm like, well, what's wrong? What's wrong with that? You know, he said some other things to me that I will not repeat in public. But that's Wynton and I had a funny relationship, or lack of friendship. But then Wynton went on to record his sort of blues suite album after that with a bunch of blues inflections. I mean, so it's one of those. Lester embraced the blues and different. The vernacular vocabularies. Wynton was somewhat dismissive of them, but I saw him work with Lester Bowie's repertory trumpet ensemble before it became Brass Fantasy, and with Oladara, Stanton Davis, Malachi Favors, Malachi Thompson, Lester, I can't remember the trumpeter, but Wynton had to pull out his carnival shit because these other motherfuckers from Chicago and Harlem were going to cut him for just trying to be too cute and pretty, you know. But Wynton can play it. He knows the stuff, but he's dismissive at times, fancy. Just like Branford apparently just said that Kamasi Washington is a sometimey jazz guy. I don't know what he meant by that, but Buckshot LaFunk, Jesus.
So as a listener, it sounds to me like there's music that is superficially simple, and there's music that is superficially complicated, and neither one earns your respect on either of those merits.
No, I'll give an example of an article that I wrote as a cover story for a magazine called Stage and Studio, I believe they call it at that point in time, or Music and Sound Output, one of the two. It's the same magazine. It's an Al Di Meola article. He's a guitar player. He was working with a guy named Lefebvre, a French technology guy, and they were doing sampling and looping and doing it on stage. And he has a drum machine trigger. And I am not a fan of Al Di Meola's music. And the publicist was very upset that I was assigned to write the cover story. And I said, well, Rocket, my editor is not going to pull me off the article and assign somebody else. We'll just lose it. She said, well, you don't even like the music. I said, I don't have to like it. But I do have to understand what he's trying to accomplish. It's like if I go to a steak restaurant, I don't have to like steak, but I didn't know if it's cooked well enough. I'm writing a review about it. That's my job. I'm a professional. I wrote the review, and I wrote and said, Al Di Meola doesn't know what a bent note is if it strangled his ass. But what he's trying to do with the feedback and all this, it's interesting if you like that kind of thing and what he's doing. And I explained what it was. She called me up and said it was a great article. I said, all I was trying to do was explain his music. So I may say something like that, but that's me making an assessment. And people used to say that they never knew what I thought about music because I never offered an opinion whether I liked it or not. But the point is that it's not always whether I like it or not, whether it's any good. But I still may have commentary on it.
Yeah. And you don't have to like everything, but it's you're not going to like a whole lot of stuff if you're not looking for what's appealing about it. If you're only focused on what's really irritating you about it.
Well, if it's really irritating, I usually don't write about it or play it. So
okay, so Al Di Meola is not in that category.
No, I wouldn't play Al Di Meola. It was an assignment. I was getting paid, so.
Aha.
It was a cover story.
So, so you're getting more into the blues as you're getting older, and at this, I'm guessing like this is like high school or something like that.
Yeah.
And so then you move on to college. Where'd you go?
Pomona College, Claremont, California, where I had two sage hens, where I had really fortuitous good luck for going to a college that turned out to not be as liberal artsy as I thought it was going to be. But the evil Stanley Clarke, who wasn't as evil back then as he's become, was a professor there. I'm sorry, Stanley Clarke. Stanley Clarke
Thank you, Ben.
was he had a famous. He was a poet and a writer, self-educated beyond after a certain point in time. He had a record on Flying Dutchman. Ain't no ambulance for us. I can't say the word because people get offended if you say it in public tonight. But it's the N word, so So anyway, but I'm just not going to cause a controversy by reading his whole title. And I have actually found a copy of it. And he kind of denounced his own writing. He denounced Amiri Baraka, the black thinker, poet, at some point in time. But he moved on he was a teacher at Pomona College. Also there in my freshman class was David Murray, the saxophone player who was the co-founder of the World Saxophone Quartet. Black Arthur Blythe, or Arthur Blythe as he became known before he died, was also around the school. Bobby Bradford, a cornetist, was there. Roberto Miranda, a bass player. Butch Morris, a cornetist, composer, conductor, conductionist, and John Carter, clarinetist. So these are people that I would see play on the quad at lunch as a freshman in college. Oh, and also George C. Wolfe was in my class. the playwright and director. So I had this cultural view that was surprising. Oh, Angela Davis taught there briefly too, but you couldn't take her class. But I didn't care. So I was influenced by these people just because I was hearing music that I hadn't heard before. Basically, West Coast free jazz stuff. So that was interesting to me. And then I met these Texans. Marc Steiner was one guy's name. The other guy's name I cannot remember at all. But they introduced me to Bob Wilson's Texas Playboys, Western swing stuff. I already knew Commander Cody and stuff, but that was like pop rock, silly shit. But they introduced me to go back to down that rabbit hole of like white rural music, and so I knew a little bit of it. But so I started listening to that. And the other fortuitous thing was, aside from getting a tax refund every April, there was a store at 44 Lake Avenue in Pasadena, California called J&F Southern Record Sales. J&F, John and Frank, one of them ended up working for Chris Drakowitz, who started our Hooli Records up in Oakland, California, so El Cerrito, actually, I think, California, or was it Oakland? So you could go there with your $175 tax refund. They would open and play anything you wanted. And they'd also say, if you like this, check this out. And of course, if you're spending $175 in 1974 or something, you'd also get stuff. You get a lot of records, and you get stuff cheap or free because they're like, who are these kids walking in spending this much money on stuff they've never heard before, but they want to buy it. So I was lucky enough to be in an environment where I could buy a lot of stuff, and so I just learned that I picked up more things then. Marc Steiner was a little crazy, and he owned his roommate, or he owned an oscilloscope. I remember we sat one day, smoking pot probably, maybe drinking beer. They drank Texas beer, listening to Eric Dolphy's God Bless the Child, his solo bass clarinet, watching it through an oscilloscope. I know, I was a little dweeby, can I say? And I had a radio show there too. So
what were all these influences doing for you? These, Western swing. Were you digging it, and how?
Well, I then figured out that Western swing and Count Basie had a lot in common. Yeah. So cross-referencing musical stuff, musical influences, and the whole issue you mentioned race earlier, race records. And I started listening to a lot of string bands, or as you call them, songsters. I got to say, I don't really like songsters. Like Mantle Lipscomb is a really good guitarist, really good musician, but his songster stuff, not so much. The Memphis Jug Band, sometimes it's a little grating, but they did walk right in. The New Christian Minstrels covered it and made a lot of money off it. But the thing is that songsters, well, they played dances. They played public forums, so they had to know a lot of songs, or as they would say about some Chicago players, like he's a human jukebox, Magic Slim, they called the human jukebox, because he knows 5,000 blues songs or whatever. So it's a business thing too. But sometimes I felt that songsters, black songsters in particular, had to be songsters to not be black, to appeal to a white audience, to get it. So that was always the issue I would have with them. But
I don't know.
Leadbelly was a hell of a guitarist and a singer, but what he was like for was being a songster. Big Bill Brunzi.
Yeah,
they turned him. Bill Brunzi was a good guitar player, was a good picker. But you have to go back to those early records before John Hammond turned him into whatever he turned him into, so that he would be acceptable. That's another longer story. John Hammond admitted to John Hammond Sr., who was at Columbia Records, who signed all the interracial bands and stuff, Benny Goodman and all that. But he did talk about what he had to figure out what to do with black artists. And he did say something basically that I can't really have a large black man with sweat circles on his shirt, so we can't sell it to a white girl. We can't sell it. So we have to figure out how to sell a black male musician to the white teenage girl, because then she'll make her boyfriend buy it. He said this on tape.
Sure, I think Chess Records probably didn't go that route, but
well, Marshall Jr.
Hold on.
Marshall Jr. did anyway.
All right.
Anyway.
This is good stuff, but we're going
Okay.
We're gonna swing back to Don Palmer.
Okay, I'm sorry. What? Well, it's my thought process.
It is. It's
That's
good
why I have
thought
all
process.
those records that I'm not even playing. So.
Yeah. So back to college, and Pomona College. So you are getting introduced to Western Swing. You're getting introduced to your fellow students are playing some really, excuse me, really heady jazz, and then you're being taught by a prominent jazz critic who's very traditional, who has very traditional ideas of what jazz is and is not.
I would say mercenary, not necessarily traditional. He said be a muckraker, so Stanley would change positions when it was convenient. Stanley turned on Cecil Taylor and Blood Ulmer. Cecil Taylor, the piano player, third string. Blood Ulmer, harmonica guitarist. He worked in Ornette Coleman's band. Stanley turned on them. If he'd been champ, he turned on David Murray because he joined Witten at Lincoln Center, so he had a new party line. So Stanley's an opportunist.
Okay.
He gave me a good talk.
All right.
So different.
Okay,
that's a far more complicated conversation.
All right. Well.
But he's a good friend of mine.
It's a good place for that. But
Not anymore.
Well, I wish him all the good health he has left in the world. There's not much left. So
what were you getting from him in class?
what I got from what he would do, it was like a 2 or 3 hour lecture class, and he would play music. He was really, one thing was really important that he taught me was about Louis Armstrong. I watched Louis Armstrong on the variety shows as a kid, and I didn't like him. The handkerchief thing or whatever it is, so we all thought of him as the Uncle Tom. Why I gravitated towards blues, since that was slavery music, I can't really answer for it necessarily. But the Louis Armstrong thing was bothersome to the civil rights activists and such, what his presentation was. And so Stanley went back, and he had like several weeks of Louis Armstrong seminar. He was maybe going to write a book about it, but he made you listen to it and listen to the phrasing of Louis Armstrong, the vocalization, how in fact he influenced Billie Holiday, who influenced Dinah Washington, and how important he was, and also the fact that he had lesser musicians playing with him all the time, but that he always kept up a very high standard. We're talking about the Hot 5 and the Hot 7. You know, and he had to do what he had to do to make a living.
His first solo groups.
Yeah. So he made us listen to it, and I listened and thought, okay, and also the recording quality, because the way they recorded back then, like the drums were like a block and things like that. So some of the other instrumentation couldn't come through that well and was stiff, but he never was, and so that's something I never really thought about, and so he gave me that I really deeply appreciate, and later in life, going to see the Warner Brothers movies with Louis Armstrong and Billie Holiday, who's from Baltimore, and she's playing a maid, and you see Louis Armstrong, he looks pissed off as the butler. His eyes, he cuts back and forth, and you realize when he takes a solo, you realize he's not playing a fool here. He's just, it's a job, and he has a look like he's disgusted with the people around him. So I think that, Stanley taught me that there's more Louis Armstrong than a comic. And I had another college professor whose theory about things of that nature is that Louis Armstrong or brilliant genius artists in America have to act comedic or the clown because Americans want to think that their entertainers are just like them, so that they will turn on anybody who they think whose talent is superior and God-given, and they can never achieve that. So that people like Louis Armstrong have to pretend in some ways that they're just a common man, a common person. That was a Robert Dawidoff's theory of Louis Armstrong.
Interesting theory. So, and I can see some application to it, but you are taking this onto the airwaves. You're taking everything that you're absorbing, and tell us about how you started as a radio DJ.
Pomona College had a college radio station, and also LA, San Francisco, both have Pacifica stations, so there are freeform stations. In Pomona College, it's just a college radio station. You could play whatever you want, so I just would go in and play stuff. And I was collecting records, so I had, the time to do it. I don't know if I was any good on the radio. I also, though, became head of the student union, the programmer of the student union, which is really a big mistake because I showed movies and I had music. I showed Triumph of the Will, yes, preceded by the Lester Young short where they circle around. He's from Count Basie's band, Lester Young. So you all don't know. He went on to he played with duets with Billie. He played with Billie Holiday. They would feature the two of them in sort of duets. But there's this great thing of his pork pie hat where they circle the camera. It's a French director. They circle around it, and it's a gorgeous thing. And I played that. I think in W.C. Handy's The St. Louis Blues. He wrote the St. Louis Blues. So I did these things with Triumph of the Will or Sergei Eisenstein movie. I can't remember exactly which was which. Then I also had David Alexander, who was a piano player from Oakland, originally from Marshall, Texas, which is Floyd Dixon's hometown. He lived in Oakland. He changed his name to Omar Hakim back in 1971 or 72. He decided to become a blues piano playing Muslim. I don't know. Anyway, Omar Hakim was a novelist, also a poet. So I don't know what day his whole thing was. But he was a damn good piano player. So I hired him. He stayed at my house because he didn't have any money. I hired James Newton and David Murray to play duets, which
on the radio?
No, live. I controlled the student union money. So there was. I forgot the place was called, the Pit or something, but I programmed that. I programmed it in my own image, which did make everybody very happy. I would give people their money back for wanting to leave. I also called them nasty names as they left, but that's a different thing. So, but I paid them back to call them nasty names.
Folks, if you leave,
which is free. So
you are somebody.
So we're going to start back, but I'm going to play two pieces of music. But just so you know, that mumbling voice was just there or whatever, that it was actually me doing the interstitial on my radio show from 1981. But I figured out what I was playing because I don't have notes here. It was Dick Gregory, then Mahalia Jackson, and then the Temptations.
Not together.
No, just back to back to back at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I got away with a lot of shit because a guy told me, he worked in a mattress factory, he said, I don't like some of the things you play. He said, but you're the only person I know that can play Prince, Ornette Coleman, and Cecil Taylor in the middle of the afternoon because you play short segments and you sandwich it between something that I like. Before I know I hate it, it's halfway through. So
that's a good strategy.
So what I'm gonna play you just two things. One, just because Brooks has more questions for him. I'm playing this with a story behind it, I hope. So this is Charlie Parker, Relaxing in Camarillo. Now, I wrote my senior thesis about Charlie Parker because Pomona College required that. But this is a 6-volume set of all the recordings for this particular label with all the alternate takes. So just so you know how obsessive I could get, I may have been out to Joshua Tree National Monument and done peyote or not, I can't remember. But I do remember staying up all night playing every track by myself in my dorm room. So we're going to listen to one song. This is a song about his rehab facility. In Camarillo, California. Charlie Parker was a bebop alto player, in case y'all don't know who he is. So, I'm a 19-year-old kid. My date night is 6 of these albums. My room alone with a green, scratchy couch from Leroy's Boys Home. It was a Salvation Army of not Pasadena, of Pomona, California. This I'm playing, before we get back to it, I won't play the whole thing. This is an album that changed my life and altered my perception of how to define what a musician is. Fred McDowell, Mississippi Fred McDowell, was a blues musician, played bottleneck guitar from Mississippi, obviously, and I had his other stuff. Capitol Records decided to record him. Have no idea what made them think that was a great idea, other than the Rolling Stones had stolen some of his music. But we're just going to play this beginning of this song, and you'll see, if I can read this now.
My name is Fred McDowell. They call me Mississippi Fred McDowell. But my home's in Rockford, Tennessee. But it don't make any difference. It sounds good to me. I seem like I'm at home now when I'm in Mississippi. And I do not play no rock and roll, y'all. I just play the straight natural blues. And whenever you get somebody, want to ply for you, just call for Fred McDowell. I was raised on the farm, you understand. Now, only way you can rock, Fred, you have to put him in a rocking chair. I used to lay me down, you understand. That's my type of rocky. In my type of blues, I played with a bottleneck. I first got this style from a beef bone, you understand. Raised will come out of a steak. My uncle, when I was a small boy in the country, he ground this bone down and fired it with a file and put it on a little plank. But I played on my ring finger, you understand? And his bottleneck sound better than the bone, because he gets more clear sound out of it. And I would like for you to, who's never listened to it, or you don't buy one of the tapes, or album, anything, I like for you listening to what I'm saying. I make the guitar say what I say, you know. If I say our Father, he'll say our Father. If I give out a hymn, he'll say it. If I play Mason Grace, he'll sing that too. Now that's my style. What you hear me doing there? I hope y'all like it. Who's never get it?
That's when I began to question authenticity and purity and what it meant. Fred McDowell.
What did... Sounds like somebody needs a new timing belt.
Don't talk about that. I own a Volvo.
Yeah. I know what that sounds like. I know what it feels like. Authenticity in music. What did Fred teach you about that?
Well, since I had been somewhat resistant to the notion of some sort of certain types of cross-cultural pollination, or it could be just marketing by record companies and all to force people into situations that they didn't necessarily want to be in. For example, John Lee Hooker, I liked Canned Heat a lot. I liked Hot Tuna. I loved the Jefferson Airplane. They did really good things. Jefferson Airplane was an acoustic trio. Hot Tuna was an acoustic trio. German Cocoon, the guitar player for Jefferson Airplane and for Hot Tuna, was a damn good blues guitar player. It was a Quicksilver Messenger Service, Janis Joplin. But they were copying another form of American music, or black American music, and getting perhaps more credit for it than than the people who created it, or more financial credit. So it's always a question of what's real and what's not. But the point is that Janis Joplin could sing her ass off, and she sang her ass off till she died. So you gotta, I always loved her voice. So maybe, and then this being a guy saying, I'm going to play electronic music. I'm playing electric guitar, straight up electric power trio essentially, but put me in a rocking chair. I'm just playing straight and natural blues. Don't call it rock and roll, but he's playing rock and roll. So it just made me think that how you evaluate the fact that musicians can hear other sounds and evolve and still make it their own.
Yeah.
And so I think, so it just made me start questioning that. And then the question of the anthropologist, the ethnomusicologist, codifying. I mean, I'm a music writer. I label stuff. You have to do that sort of because record stores have to label stuff because people have to be able to find it. So it just made me start thinking more about that, and it also loosened up my appreciation of a lot of other musicians who I thought were doing stuff just for commercial purposes only.
Now,
not everybody did. But.
Yeah. Around the same time, I think that this record was coming out, there were blues considered blues musicians, classified blues musicians, who were being pressured to update. Muddy Waters had this album called Electric Mud, and there's Wah Wah all over it.
That's Chess Jr. That's Marcel Chess the Kid.
Yeah.
And the record's in London.
Yeah. And I think Howlin' Wolf had an album.
Yes, he did, yeah.
That he didn't like, and things like that. So it's...
I believe the Rotary Connection was part of that.
Yeah. And so it seems like maybe there are a lot of people who say that was not authentic, not because these musicians can't grow and change, but maybe like what you're saying with Fred McDowell. Fred McDowell was able to grow and change the way he wanted to.
Yeah.
And so
that sounded like Fred McDowell. There was no compromise in that. It's just that he upped up the amplification to whatever was appropriate in 1973. Those Chess records in London, that was Marcel Chess Jr. I've been in the room with the guy and listened to him, and we were filming him, and it was his opportunity to make a statement and do something musically and have a conversation about it. But also, he talked in a way that was that was offensive, in the sense of that he found his adoration of these black men, and he talked about their shoes and various things, which was all very cool, if you dress better. But it still was about how he thought he knew better how to market them and exploit them. Now, Muddy Waters once said, Marcel Chess may have made $1 million off me, maybe 100,000. So what the hell, So there is that. I mean, it is business. So, I mean, you've got my rant about world music. so
I sure do. I pulled it out specifically for this purpose.
I decided that I wanted to be able to better appreciate music, and then at about this point in time too, I got to. You said you were going to mention it. I had the opportunity to go to Kenya as a second semester sophomore at Pomona College, for just college tuition with the family and all. So I'm thrown into an environment, and where I had a family to stay with, but I studied some Swahili, but I had to then interact with local Kenyans and everything, and then figure out things like if someone wants me to give them 7 cents, that ain't shit to me. It's a lot to them, and that they're playing this music that's sort of Congolese, but they're Kenyan. They don't even speak French, but that Congolese music is sort of Cuban. Oh, right, the slaves went, so it's just starting to make the connections, how music and culture travels. And then you go out, Kenya not so much, because the music's not that great in Kenya necessarily, depends on where you are, but, well.
Sorry, Kenya.
Yeah. But you go out sunset, because when you're in equatorial regions, if you've ever traveled there, the sun rises and sets essentially within the same 15 half-hour period, 6:45 in the morning to 7:15, so that's a half-hour swing when you're on the equator. So basically, people start their wood fires or charcoal fires, whatever, the same time every day because they've come home from the fields. And then if you're in West Africa, the kora players start up, or there's some drumming that happens. So I began to associate the smell of wood, charcoal, with music, and the smell of sizzling meat or porridge being stirred. So it became so music took on more and more of a context and a social function, that occurred. Instead of turning on the evening news, they turned on the local drummer, whatever it might be. So I think I started thinking music not just as a thing on a platter, but as part of a whole social dynamic. So,
you have anything that we could listen to that might be representative of what you're hearing over there?
Mm-hmm. I do, as a matter of fact.
What you got?
Something nobody's ever heard of. Let's see what I'm going to do.
I'll buy somebody a drink if they actually have heard of it. I don't care. I get a staff drink.
Orchestra no, I won't even tell you. But we'll just see if you can guess. I don't. I'm pretty certain I bought this from a local record store somewhere in Africa.
Ozali mwasi ya bato e mama matata na kobanga na motema na zoki pota ya koloba tema
You're in a beer garden. It's just.
Soki pe mosika talaka se mokili beko ya mwasi.
Anybody?
Oh,
does Ari knows it? Oh, you're familiar
Good
with
though.
it?
Good, that's good. It is. It's Lingala. It's. Tabule Rochero, man. He was.
Willie, isika ya pasi na Bowie kame.
Is that a guitar? Wonderful place. Sounds like something they play on Caribbean beach.
Yeah, but this is from 40 years ago. But yeah, they're probably singing Langalas or Orchestra Lupia Lupua, whoever they are. It's on Elengi Records. But I was hitchhiking from Lagos, hopefully to Algeria, back in 1977. I was young, I was energetic. I'm alive, so I was wise. But my girlfriend and I, we were between Niamey, which is in Niger, on the way to Ouagadougou, which was then Outvolta, hadn't had a revolution yet, which is not Burkina Faso. Dark, late at night, they used to have the trucks, the communal vans were Saviem vans, or the French van, which is basically was a French bread truck back then, and if you're in Paris or in France. And it broke down, but there's potholes, there's sinkholes full of water and stuff because it's rainy season, you're in the dark, and they get you out, and fix the damn thing in the middle of the night in the dark, put you back in, but there's a radio playing. I'm listening and saying, what is that? That sounds like One String Sam from Detroit. It was a one-string Sam. He played.
He only had one string.
Yeah, he had one string. It was whatever fiddle. It had a nickname for it, but and I thought that's weird. But this was like the diddly bow. But there was a one-string lute thing that was played in Burkina Faso or Odd Volta back then. I get to Ouagadougou. We get to the depot. We get out. This guy says, a cab driver says, "Well, it's the middle of the night. Tell you what, you can stay in my place. I'm going to stay with my girlfriend. I'm not going to charge you anything for it." It was a mud and stone condominium, they call it, one-story thing. Corrugated roof, outdoor bathroom, and all. And my girlfriend was horrified in the morning when she woke up and discovered that the palmetto bugs, we'll call them, had devoured the crotch of her underwear because they like dirty shit. They're roaches. They eat. How roaches eat your clothes. Well, they were hungry that night. But we stayed a couple nights, and and we had a nice time. You go to the bathroom, you take a flashlight so the roaches scatter, so you can use the hole in the ground. But I went to a record store. It's one important part. What's on the damn wall of the record store? A John Lee Hooker 45 in Ouagadougou, because they kind of related to
American blues musician.
Yeah, I'm sorry. John Lee Hooker was the one-chord boogie guy that's Can Heat covered, and then John Lee Hooker then had to only do the one-chord boogie.
What's his big stuff like Boom Boom?
Boom Boom Boom, yeah.
And one Scotch, one bourbon, one
No,
beer.
no, that's Amos Milburn.
No?
Yeah, David Milburn.
I thought he did it. Well, maybe he did.
He may have done a version of it. It wasn't his original song.
Okay.
But trust me on that one, I can tell you. But
I trust you.
but Hooker, I mean, if you went to see him live and he decided not to be constrained, could actually play some interesting guitar phrasing stuff. It's almost like he was playing a cigar box guitar, but that's not what he was playing. But he ended up in Detroit, and he got recorded, and that became his shtick. He was the boogie guy, guitar boogie. But it was just, to me, it was interesting. Like, whoa, I'm like in the savannah of West Africa, and they have a John Lee Hooker 45 on the wall.
So I wonder what that means about. When we think about music as a part of a locality in today's age, and that sort of brings me into what we're talking about here. You wrote in Audio Magazine back in December 1991. You're talking about.
That makes me kind of laugh. Audio Magazine, Jesus Christ! Is it even? I know it doesn't exist anymore, but I think Haché probably bought them and closed it. But anyway.
Yeah, so you are actually tasked with this. This must have been a little difficult. Writing.
No, I pitched the story.
What's that?
I pitched this story.
Oh, you pitched this story.
Yeah.
Oh, you wanted this.
Yeah.
Actually, it makes kind of sense that you would want this because. You are writing about a compilation series of African music that has a lot of information with it, but the information is in Japanese. So if you're an English-speaking person that is buying it, you have no idea what the contexts are.
That is true.
Yeah, you have no idea what's going on. You say, by providing an English-speaking market with beautiful cover art but lengthy, unreadable books, the Ethnic Sound series imposes on the listener the necessity of hearing this other world music as pure sound, which isn't all to the bad. It means that we who assume our multicultural badges proudly must listen with all our attendant biases, since significance can't follow an unknown function. I read a little Kant and College, so I kind of understand what you're talking about. But I wonder if you could stretch that out for me.
Well, first of all, Kant, there was two constants in human being existence, is time and space.
Why did I?
We can argue that, but anyway. No, what? Oh yeah, but so does a lot of people. Yeah, I mean that's yeah, well. So what about Heidegger, man, the Nazi? But anyway, so
let's talk about more racist philosophers.
Joseph Campbell. Let's talk about him. No. This was the time there where the Japanese were putting out. I can't remember what even the label was. Just a Japanese version of American label or something, I think. And also, Rounder, I think, was doing all the Alan Lomax, releasing all the Alan Lomax archives. So part of I was writing these stories is sort of a pissy thing about the fact that I respect that this stuff is coming out, but that I was really annoyed by the terminology of world music. That there's, to me, I even wrote in a different article, which I didn't have here, is that there's no such thing as world music. There's music from different parts of the world, And the fact that it's beautiful that Lomax and this stuff here, some of which may have been Lomax, I'm not sure, as I didn't read this over, went out with cassette recorders and captured the sounds, whatever it is, of this music, but then it becomes codified or even reified that this is the music of these people. They cannot hear anything else. But the point is, once Lomax or these people have recorded it and put it out there, other people hear it, including their neighbors who now have devices that they hear them on. So, in traveling in Africa with people in the Peace Corps, and the question of if you bring a Discman or Walkman, wasn't Discman, a Walkman in, does that raise desire in the community? Is that a good or bad thing? But the whole question of that a transference of information. So I was just sort of writing and being a little cryptic to get it past my editors instead of saying I'm a little annoyed with some of the marketing people with this stuff. But the question is that music, food, lives in a social context. But that music and food is not static. And so therefore, a musician who's any good, of any interest, is going to meet a musician from the tribe down the road or down the highway or down the internet these days, whatever it is, and maybe get influenced by that and make good use of it. Now, there are those within the classical world, for example, who are really offended by the classical musicians and string quartets who wanted to work with Mali musicians or Senegalese musicians and all, and saying that you're denigrating a musician. Who are Who are these people? These Indian musicians, these Chinese? It's like, no, actually, they're really good musicians, and they're exchanging musical ideas, and I think that can occur. So I was kind of taking a piss on it in a way, but also.
I'm glad you did.
But those are actually really good records. And I shall own them, or they're probably CDs. But I think that, I'm wearing an Indian shirt. What the hell? I'm wearing an American hat. That you can participate in the other culture without denigrating them or without treating them, without it being minstrelsy. So that was my question. Was sort of right. I didn't do it directly there, but it's sort of that question of how do you interact with something outside your known boundaries.
Well, you have to try and locate the authenticity, right? That Fred McDowell's
right.
showing you.
Right. I guess it would be. That's why I never know if it's authenticity or pure. No, authenticity, not purity. Purity is bad. Because,
no.
Because you never change.
Probably that stuff that Kant was talking about.
Yeah, right.
No.
right. Yes.
Authenticity is somewhat personal, but also just it feels real. It feels like it comes from this person, and this person comes from a certain culture and has gathered this and has gathered that. And it all comes in in not a contrived way. Is that?
That yes.
So I think what you're getting.
I don't like contrivance. I'll always say that.
Yeah. I think what you're getting at is something that gets to the heart of my series, which is that we're people living in the world, and we're absorbing all kinds of things and all kinds of music, particular to what we're talking about here, and to nail a person down or a listener down to one thing should be absurd, but it's not, or it doesn't seem that way.
Well,
in society.
Well, in my job, my former job as a music critic, whatever, journalist, music journalist and stuff, is that it did have. I was probably supposed to say, that person's a really bad drummer. Go back to tenor saxophone. Okay, but that's a judgment. But that was part of a job, and a band leader says, no, you don't do that very well, or you don't barbecue ribs well. You're not a good smoker, but you're a good fry cook. But that doesn't mean you're being narrowed down. It's just focus on what you're good at, or get better at what you aren't good at. But those are entirely different things.
Don't do it, just do it. Yeah. Awesome. So, getting back to Don Palmer here.
Well, actually, it is Don Palmer. Because I kind of... Can I read something, maybe? No, never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, you can.
No, you can. I'm not going to... I think I already said it. So
what did you say?
About when they start the fires at dusk.
Oh,
and
yeah,
everything,
yeah.
And then you think, the music is connected with this. So therefore, my sort of connection to all this stuff, it's sometimes is sort of wide-ranging. So it could involve literature, it could involve food, could involve the smell of the river or the mud. So
literature, that's a good one. So so after you're done with school, you tell us how you started writing, music writing as a career.
I can't remember the guy's name. He wrote an article for a paper in Madison, Wisconsin, the Socialist Feminist or Feminist Socialist paper, depending on who you were talking to, about Wardell Gray. And he finished by saying, why haven't we heard more from Wardell Gray? I thought because they found him with a broken neck outside Las Vegas in 1954, whatever it is, so that would be kind of hard for him to do any more recording. And I asked the guy, and he was a radio colleague of mine, so I thought that was a little weird. Maybe he meant just more unearthed recordings, but what he did say was that I could take over his column. So that's how I started writing for the hippie paper. And I became the editor of the hippie paper, and I had the radio shows. And then I wrote for another local paper. Then I was solicited to apply for a job at Sing Out magazine, which was owned by Pete Seeger. If you remember Pete Seeger from Weema Way and whatever, so it was the folky magazine, and he wanted me for an interview because he was intrigued that a black person from the middle of America wanted to come to New York and be an editor of his magazine. I got the job. I went there. I started writing for the Soho News because Rob may remember this. Remember a magazine called Social Context? Okay, so this guy was based, Social Context, that's I understand the title, but it was a materialist social history magazine, and I knew the publisher, the editor in Madison, Wisconsin, who brought this guy, Rob Ochio-Grosso, who edited the music section of the Soho News to my Memorial Day barbecue. So he said, when you come to New York, come see me. So I got some gigs with the Soho News. They promptly folded when I got there, within 3 months. Wrote a couple articles. And then Stanley Crouch hooked me up with Robert Christgau at the Village Voice. Christgau rejected my first article on Henry Threadgill and Air because he said I was too thorough. The Village Voice readers know better than that. They whatever it is, even if they don't, but you don't want to give them a whole background thing. Make it more. I don't know. you tell your own story. Don't talk about every song on the album, because they don't need to know his background, his biography, the blow by blow. I rewrote it. He printed it, and he was my editor for years. A pain in the ass, but he was a damn good editor, a great line editor. You don't really like it when your editor says you're not as smart as you think you are, but what the hell? He's going to still publish it and print me. So that was it. Then I went on to write for the New York Times and New York Newsday and a bunch of other publications, Downbeat and stuff. But as a freelancer, but I kept a day job. I was a speechwriter for the borough president of Brooklyn for 3.5 years. So I was a shill.
Koch?
No, for Howard Golden, the borough president of Brooklyn.
Oh, president of Brooklyn.
Yeah, the borough president. I never wrote. I worked for Mayor Koch. I read the paper. Pre-internet, you clipped the paper out and you glued it down and made photocopies. I used to do that. I've had a lot of shitty jobs. So.
That's how it goes in music, but not here. Yeah. This is a wonderful job. but otherwise, outside of Creative Alliance, it's a hell. It's a hell. I really like reading your pieces. I wonder when you're writing, what is your motivation? Do you have any influences? I think we talked a little bit about your strategy before.
I used to. This is a digression. It's not a digression of a story, but I flew to New York when I moved there from Toledo, Ohio, through Scranton, Pennsylvania. There was an airline called Allegheny or Agony Airlines. I had an IBM Selectric, the big green motherfucker with the ball on it and everything, and I had it in the seat next to me. And we were in a flight that was delayed because of lightning storms. We had to fly in circles around LaGuardia. And I land, and I get on the subway carrying an IBM Selectric. It wasn't, 55 pounds or something? And I carried that in New York. That was how I wrote my stories then. But I wrote everything out longhand, and then I typed it because I was a horrible typist. So I wrote everything out longhand to perfection. And Beth was talking about writing a letter to a friend of ours, an 8-page letter. I won't get into all the details, but she said it was just doing that. And I said, yeah, I remember I used to write longhand, and you had to stop and think and cross everything out and start over again. And people would look at those manuscripts and go, what were you doing? Because you circled everything. So that was my writing process. I would sit, I'd walk around, I would listen to music, I would think and think and think, and then write it out longhand, then type it. My influences would be Ralph Ellison, believe it or not, Albert Murray, Stanley Clarke, Faulkner. Not to be too highfalutin, I'm not a novelist. Okat Batek, the Ugandan writer.
What were each of these writers doing for you? What do you like about what they had to say about the music?
Faulkner was just a good storyteller.
Sure.
So it was that. Ellison, The Invisible Man. I read The Invisible Man while hitchhiking through West Africa. So seeing the parallels between West Africa and his Invisible Man living in a subway was kind of fascinating. I think I read some Evelyn Waugh while doing that too for some.
Ellison, he wrote a little bit about blues music too.
He did.
Right?
Ralph Ellison did Shadow and Act. He wrote about the notion of that the ephemeral, that a note decays, is gone, but he wrote it in his own manner. So yeah, there's good. And then Albert Murray, when he finally started writing at 50, wrote some brilliant essays and stories. Kind of a reactionary asshole, but reactionary in the sense that he's very middle class. But
what did you like about him?
I liked the fact that he could write that Albert Murray could spend a page writing about a chinaberry tree blossoming and the fragrance you get from it, which is what music is. Like how do I go to a show on Thursday night, turn in a story Friday morning to tell people who didn't go to the show, who cannot see it, why they should have been there and go next time? Which is what the job is. It's so when I was interviewed for the borough president's office when I worked with Mayor Koch, to be a speechwriter. They asked, can you write whatever? I said, you realize that what I do mainly is write fiction, because I'm telling people about something they cannot experience because it doesn't exist anymore. And they thought, that's a pretty interesting concept. Not that I'm lying to them, but the point is that when I'm writing about music, I'm trying to convey to someone something that's in my head that I've heard that no longer exists, but to place them there, or to try as best I can. And so that's my process. I don't know. I used to ride the subways when we had Walkman, whatever, with earphones, and listen to whatever the recording is I have to write about over and over again on the way back and forth to work, until I sat down to write about it. I never wrote in drafts, but that's because I was influenced by Jack Kerouac when I was in junior high school. You only write one draft. Isn't that the Kerouacan way? So I was a young hippie, beatnik, I thought, in Toledo, Ohio. So I didn't believe in rewrites as such, but that also meant I thought for days on end about what I had to write. But I don't advise that as a proper way to approach writing to young people. If I taught a course, I had a girlfriend who made her insane because she was a writer and she became my editor too. She lived with me, and she couldn't understand how we'd go to work, come home, make dinner, drink a bottle of wine, whatever else may do, and then at midnight start writing and finish at 4 a.m, go to sleep, get up and go to work in the morning. And she said, I can't do that. I said, no, don't try to do that. That's a really bad idea. But I have a different constitution, and it worked for me up until it didn't.
So this is a really good piece of writing that
Sonny Chirac,
you're doing on Sonny Chirac. Yeah, I wonder if we could hear a little bit of it. So, I wish I could find it. Okay. Chirac plays rhythm in the most innocuous and proper of manner. The music chugs along pleasantly until Chirac takes a solo. Instead of laying in the groove, he traverses it with sheets of screams that shatter the mood. If his guitar weren't so anti-minimalist, these solos could be the precursors to hip-hop scratching.
This is not the record that I'm writing about.
Okay.
But nonetheless, doesn't matter. Sonny Chirac.
Yeah. It's to me, reading this, they're reading what you're writing. There's a lot of imagery in it. There's sheets of scream, sheets of sound, John Coltrane.
No, in this case, it's sheets of scream.
Sheets of scream.
I sat in a Sonny Chirac show at the Kitchen in Manhattan, and when the Kitchen was in Tribeca, not Tribeca, and on 19th Street by 11th at 10th Avenue. I swear to God, his guitar sound knocked my hat off my head. So, that's not sound. That's just more. Soundgarden
knocked your head off like it was that loud.
Like that, yeah,
yeah,
like that, yeah.
Yeah, but I think that I don't even know the guy's music. I'm about to hear it for the first time, but I'm reading it, like someone who, might go check it out because you wrote this column. I'm reading it and I'm getting a lot of visual imagery from this auditory medium. So I wonder if what you're going to play might emphasize that.
Would you like the more out or the more that has a bass line to it?
Let's go out. Let's have fun.
Sonny Chirac played with Herbie Mann, the flautist. Okay, here's a process question. Get all music critic you like on you. Now, say, listen to this. It's called Blind Willie. Now, there's a Blind Willie McDowell, there's a Blind Willie Johnson. Blind Willie Johnson recorded with his wife. He also was a gospel singer. Now, Sonny Chirac in here, it seems to be playing shades or echoes of Albert Ayler, who played hymns and marches and spiritual sort of things, angels and ghosts and stuff. Sonny Chirac had a wife who recorded with Linda Chirac. So is he doing some sort of reference to Blind Willie Johnson and his wife doing spirituals? Or is it Albert Ayler? Is it, so then that starts to become the basis of a story if I was writing about this record. And do I start talking about Blind Willie Johnson? So you've asked what happens in my head processing. So.
What year is that record?
It's on Enemy, it's Bill Laswell, I don't know, it's probably, it can be easily figured out because Sonny Chirac died on his exercise bike, like in 1989, I think, so. Unfortunately, he'd become friends of mine more after writing this. And Stanley Crouch actually contacted me and said, that's a great piece of writing. He doesn't praise people very often, but for some reason he liked this. But but that seems obscure and arcane, right? But that's sort of part of what happens.
Yeah. And I think even though you're not talking about that particular record, I think you get what I just heard pretty right when you say even his most spaced out jazz was meant to levitate the room, while his atonal surges were supposed to tear the roof off, which that wasn't, I'm not here to say what is and isn't jazz, but that wasn't the jazziest thing that I've ever heard. But it seems like for the most part, he was in a levitation space until the very end, where he's like, now I got you.
Yeah. Well, the question, it's when I moved to New York, there was James Chant, or James White and the Blacks, which became defunct, and there was Ronald Shannon Jackson, so there was a lot of edgy avant-garde electronic jazz stuff, or was it jazz or not? Was Oladara Orchestra a jazz band? Was it a blues band? I mean, so there's a lot of stuff that was trending. You know, people like
and these people don't
Zorn.
really care what.
No, they didn't really give a shit.
So,
yeah, right. They didn't so much. I mean, Henry Threadgill and Air and his various versions of Air, Zoid, whatever. I don't even know what it necessarily is. Butch Morris didn't care. I mean, in the end, they cared because they wanted to be respected for their musical output. And I tried my best to be respectful of that. But I kind of made them all. They were jazz musicians. They weren't rock musicians. They weren't, I mean, Blood Ulmer is a straight up contemporary blues musician to me. James Blood Ulmer, if you get, but he still didn't get that credit. I mean, Jimi Hendrix was a blues musician, but that's not how he was going to make his name for himself. He had to become a rock guy, whatever. So, I mean, so it's,
well,
you know, but
Jimmy really liked rock and jazz and stuff, and incorporated that stuff.
Supposedly there's a great thing of him playing with Ross and Roland Kirk at Ronnie Scott's, but you know, no one recorded it as far as I know, or has released it. But I'm saying, but the thing is, Jimmy was at heart was a blues guy. I didn't even bring in Jimi Hendrix to talk about that. It's in my stack of work I'm not going to play. But the thing is, there's a lot of Jimi Hendrix stuff. It's just like that's unreleased or under-released. He's just a blues guy. You know, he played with the Isley Brothers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not an offense to be said. So I'm just saying, so it becomes, how do we want to? Unfortunately, I think it's actually probably still necessary to provide a label, because we have drum and bass, we have emo, we have all these things. It's like that's created by the artists themselves, whatever it is. That's what's trap. I mean, is trap just drum and bass, but it's a trap drum? Is it, you know, whatever these things? So,
been able to isolate what exactly it's supposed to be.
Well, no. What I think what it means is what we can say is new this 6 month period. That's really all it comes to. I mean, I think blues is a thing. African music, well, is not really a thing since Africa is a continent, not a country, but there's certainly a vein of African music, you know. I mean, Afrobeat and Fela draws on James Brown and all that, and a lot of African countries and bands play some version of Afrobeat in some of their sets. But Afrobeat is not James Brown. It's pretty distinctive. And Fela is not James Brown. Fela is Sun Ra. You know, but we're not going to play that. So anyway, so it becomes
It's too much to play.
No, it just becomes. I always had to struggle with that. My wife, Beth, one year said my New Year's resolution should be I should not identify any musical artist or act or style of music by ethnicity or race. I got through about 2 months of that. Because you kind of can't. Because people aren't blind. They may not be bigoted, but they're not blind.
So this is a fun question I like to ask a lot of musicians. What I ask is, are there any parts of your musical identity that your audience rarely hears? For you, I guess the question would be...
Are you bringing out Crosby, Stills and Nash?
What would people be surprised to know that you listen to?
Which one of these? On the Wishbone Ash album, but I don't know anybody who listens to Wishbone Ash. I met one brother, he's dead now, he liked Wishbone Ash, playing guitar leads. But this is what I grew up, this is a hippie. Jefferson Airplane, a lot of Grateful Dead. Yeah, he thought so. That didn't matter. But the harmony. This is basically the gospel church, except the white version of it, for pop and pop music. This was without Young, so he's not here yet. But
is there anything?
Freddie Fender, "Wasted Days and Wasted Nights." That's a song I loved as a kid because it got played. Remember, and then Freddie Fender went to jail. But and then let's see, what's my other. What's it? El Paso. Is that Mo Bandy? It's Mo Bandy, right? What song? What song you can tell me I really love that I'm embarrassed by? Free Forever? No. Well, it's a song about the town of El Paso. But anyway, but I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and I paved roads. I worked with a lot of white construction workers, and I was on the road at 6 o'clock in the morning to go places. And it was either country western radio or I worked in factories, and they didn't like the soul radio station, all the white guys, and so. And there was Lupe worked in the factory with me, but they wouldn't let him play the Mexican station. So we listened to a lot of country western. But I went to a lot of bluegrass shows in fields in Ohio as a kid. So as a teenager, because you could go to the field and smoke pot, get away from home. But I will play Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young just chill out. They are good. There is that. Now, if I was like Meatloaf or something, that'd be weird.
Sorry, Meatloaf. So that's kind of a fun, silly question. Here's like an important question that I think goes to the heart of the series, and many artists have answered this in lots of interesting, different, well-thought ways. Talk about your ideas of tradition and originality.
We debated that in my kitchen in our.
I don't think we debated that.
No, we talked about it. But I'm saying, but
I think I'm where you are.
I used to work for the New York State Council on the Arts, and I funded artists and our art projects for 24 years. And I used to always admonish when I was funding the individual artist component of my job for 12 years that please do not write me an opening sentence in a paragraph in your proposal for however much money it is, for however big the budget is, that this is an original thought that's never been thought of ever before, because we've been around for too many damn centuries for you to try to say that it's never been thought about before. And some people were arguing about this, but I actually don't think, as human beings, as we exist now, there's an original thought. There's a different take on it, an interpretation of it, an explanation of it, a filtering of your own life experience through the various thoughts, but something that's never been thought of ever before. It's just a problem that hadn't been solved, but not a thought that hadn't been thought of. That, to me, there's that. Authenticity, I think, can be a trap. In a sense of that, as is original thought, being original, because you get caught up in attempting to prove maybe a negative or an unprovable. But I think, authenticity is a question of your story is original. Your musician's story, I was just talking about the music, is original if you're not just trying to sell a record based upon the last record that sold a lot of records, So if you have a story to tell, you bring a storyteller of some sort. You may not tell it well, you may get better at telling it, or you may give up and get a job in the post office or whatever, I don't know. But the thing is that to me, when I would work with musicians or grant or applicants for money, whatever, is that just tell me a story. What's the story you want to tell? Don't ask me, is it a good story, a bad story, the right story? Will this story get money? What is your story? And your story is authentic because it's your story. So, but to try to craft it to be authentic and make that big a deal, I think you get into a trap because, I don't know, authenticity could really be, what's authentic is what my great-grandfather did. And that's what I should strive to do, and only that, because that's the authentic thing. I don't know. They had, his menus were based upon really, really tough, underfed cows. So that's why they were braised in vinegar for 13 days before you cooked them. I don't know. I'm just saying. So it's I say this a lot, and I feel weird when I say it, but I'm not really one for, I don't respond positively to someone telling me I have an original thought, because I don't know what the hell that means as such, musically, because you've got a saxophone, someone's played all those keys over and over and over again before you, maybe not in the same pattern, but that doesn't mean they didn't play a song, doesn't mean they didn't have a thought. So is that
So I wonder if you could lead us home with something that you feel is a really good representation of an artist being authentic.
Probably yes. Oh. You got, should I go look? I'm trying to think. What's over there? Oh, yeah.
All right.
There we go.
Yeah, that's
And actually, it's a good way to close, too.
I'd agree with that. So what are you putting on here?
Oh. Wait. Give me maggot brain. And some wine. We'll do half of a song and then another song. Then we'll.
What's the half of the song?
No, I need that half of the song. So, as a teenager in Toledo, Ohio, I had a Ford Country Squire station wagon. And me and Butch Gandy or Whitney Blauvelt or Joel Kasperzak or Eric Kaufman, we would drive around and we had a cassette deck, I believe in it, not an 8-track, but we would play this record and then one next to it over and over again because you could drive around and sit in cornfields and smoke pot. You had no place to go because you were teenagers. And that's legal now. My record's been expunged.
Mother Earth is pregnant for the third time.
Think about this being played on the radio. They wouldn't play it now.
I have tasted the maggots in the mind of the universe. I was not offended, for I knew I had to rise above it all, or drown in my own shit.
I hate to cut off Eddie Hazel playing one of the best solos you'll ever hear. But as this is playing out, I want to thank first Don Palmer for being my guest tonight and final guest for the Songster Series, and thank you so much for bringing so much of what this is about home. I want to thank the Robert W. Deutsch Foundation, who they sponsored my fellowship here. That's how I got to be here and build programming like the Songster Series. And I definitely want to thank Creative Alliance. It's just been pretty magical to be here and work here and to build something like this, which is a lot of fun for me, and it's also really personal too as well. And I hope that some of the messages that have happened here in this series have gotten across. And if they haven't, you can just go on YouTube and watch it, because I want to thank Tom Kessler in the back. Tom has he's been here since the Susan Alcorn one back in 2017, constantly coming and documenting this. Thank you so much, Tom. Wow, we're going out on Maggot Brain.
No, we're going on one thing after that.
Oh, okay.
Short, but that's okay.
Getting a little verklempt here. But yeah, thank you guys so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've been to other Songster series in the past, I hope you've enjoyed those as well. And yeah, just listen to lots of really, really good music, and don't tell artists what to do. Thank you.
And just so to be more uplifting on another revolutionary musician of my youth, as you finish your drinks, you know, Eddie Hazel dying trumped my obit of Albert King and the Village Voice, man. It was handwritten too. I did handwrite it, but yeah, Greg Tate got to do Eddie Hazel obit. I was mad.
Albert King had no bit?
No, they didn't run it. They didn't run it. They didn't run it, man.
He died at the same time? Or?
Same week, yeah.
Wow. That's, so Albert King is one of the great...
Albert King is a great... I have the obituary handwritten on yellow legal paper. I will read it at any time. He is still dead.
Yeah.
But here we go.
Yeah.
She just died too, but anyway.
Thanks so much, folks.
Sarah with a church song.
When I grew up and fell in love, I asked my lover,
the gatefold, but I couldn't find it.
What will I be? Will I be day after day? Is how my love.
He's
my own. They asked their